Thanks for listening to the Film Florida podcast. If you have a minute, please remember to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. Thanks, and we appreciate your support. Welcome to the Film Florida podcast. I'm John Lux, and I'm the Executive Director of Film Florida. Today, our guest is Lauren O'Quinn. Lauren is an award-winning actress and owner of ClassAct Studios, which offers professional acting classes, taping services, and career advisement, and is based in Orlando. Thanks for joining us on the podcast today, Lauren.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
So tell us how you got your start in the industry.
Well, I grew up in the entertainment industry, but sort of in a different way. My father was a disc jockey. He was actually a really big disc jockey in the 60s and 70s. He traveled with the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and he's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and all kinds of cool stuff. So I grew up in that industry a little bit and hearing stories about the entertainment industry throughout my childhood, and I thought that was super cool. And I started acting in church plays, actually, and school productions, acted throughout high school in my high school drama club and everything, and then went to college at the University of Georgia, majored in theater there. And I knew that I loved acting, but theater wasn't really the best avenue for me because I'm not a singer-dancer. And so it's pretty challenging to make a living as a theater actor in only straight plays. And I'd always loved film and television. I really wanted to do that. And so I sort of found my way to Orlando in 1997 and planned to stay here for the summer. And then I was going to move to New York to continue acting. But it's been a long summer because it's now almost 22 years later, and I'm still here. So that's how I sort of got into it. It was just always something that was a passion of mine, and I've loved my entire life.
Now, you've done some talent agent work as well as some casting work, but your primary role is as an actor and an acting coach. But before we talk about the acting and coaching, talk about some of your experiences as an agent, as a casting director, and how they've helped you in what you're doing today.
That's a great question. I've had the unique opportunity to work on all sides of the industry, and that's an unusual thing, but something that Florida provides in a way that other markets really might not. When I started out in this industry, I really wanted to learn anything and everything that I could about the industry. I wanted to understand how things worked because I'm naturally curious, and it's not in my personality to say no very much. And so in 1998, I got my first agent, and I actually got that agent. She was in a play with me. She was an actor, too, and she just did theater work because that was where her background was. And we were cast in a play together, and we got to know each other through that production, and she actually played my aunt in the play. And then she asked me if I would be willing to come and intern for her because she needed an intern. And I was 20 years old, and I didn't know anything about the industry, and I thought, yeah, that sounds awesome. She said, I don't have any money, but, I'll teach you everything that I can. And I said, I'd love that. And so she had actually just helped open the Diamond Agency, which is a big agency here in Orlando.
Sure.
And I went over and interned with her. And in the interning, I started to learn the industry. And in the beginning, she just had me doing things like filing headshots, and at that time we had just an entire room full of folders of hard copies of headshots. And it was an amazingly annoying experience. We were always just overwhelmed with paper. And it was, hey, why don't you call this casting director and see if we can get more opportunities here? And then it was things like faxing the actors their copies of their sides. And so I was just really doing anything and everything I could, and I loved it. And I worked doing that. I became an assistant at the Diamond Agency, and I worked there for a couple of years, and I loved it, and I learned so much. And through that, I was referred to a job in advertising, which I went on to do, and I became an advertising account executive. I conceptualized and cast commercials, which was amazing for me because I learned the advertising industry. Through all of that, I would get asked to do things like, hey, could you come be a reader on this casting? Actors get asked to do that sort of thing a lot, and I thought, yeah, what a great opportunity to be on the other side of the casting table. And from that sort of spun into, hey, we need an assistant for this casting. Can you help us run camera? And then it was, hey, I'm actually going to be out of town. Can you run this casting and interface with the clients? And so one thing sort of led to another just because I was willing in a lot of ways. And after a few years in advertising and casting and everything, I actually eventually took over a talent agency here in Orlando. And I ran that for a few years, and that really gave me the insight of being on the other side of the industry. It's not something that I would love to go back to. I'll be honest with you. Agents have a pretty challenging job in a lot of ways because they don't really have any control over their time or when things come in. They don't really get to just sort of take a vacation because stepping away from the industry means that you may miss some big opportunity for your talent. So it's a challenging job, but it is really rewarding because you get the opportunity to groom talent and help them get to the next level. That was such a rewarding thing for me that I thought, how can I take my business of coaching actors and really sort of help them in that way, but without being bogged down with contract negotiation and all the hard things that are on the talent agency side of the business. So from my experience as a talent agent, I sort of expanded my services with my own teaching, and I added career advisement. So one of the main things that I do throughout the week is I help actors in what I call personal manager sessions. I sit down with them and I can talk to them about their agent relationships, what's working for them, what's not, what are they doing that they could, what could they do better, how could they improve that agency relationship. I try really, really hard to demystify the business for actors because most of the time I think a lot of the struggles that actors experience, besides the fact that they don't have any control and they have to audition and get rejected all the time, a lot of the troubles that they experience stem from a lack of understanding of the industry. So my experience as a casting director and as an agent helps me demystify that for them and hopefully helps the agents have actors that are much, much more prepared for the industry and understand the business and therefore can bring more to the table and be much, much easier to work with. And it helps everybody, I think, get ahead. That's my goal, at least.
So you've essentially taken bits and pieces from a lot of different roles and a lot of different experiences and molded it into a profession that you think you add a lot of value in a lot of different areas.
Exactly. I hope so. That's definitely my goal. I think it's unique to have had the opportunities that I've had to work on all these different sides of the business. And I think it would just be a tragedy if I didn't share that knowledge because that can be helpful to so many different people. I mean, it's interesting. I've actually had the opportunity to talk to casting directors about the way actors think, that casting directors, agents, everyone wants to blame a different category in the industry. So casting directors will say, oh, my God, these agents. And agents will say, these casting directors are the worst, or these talent. Well, here's what's happening for the actors, and this is what they're thinking. And I can say to the actors, well, actually, your agent is doing so-and-so. And to the, casting directors, well, the agents are having to do blah, 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 because everyone kind of lives in their own little bubble. So if I have had the opportunity to be in each bubble for a little bit, then I think it's a really great opportunity for me to maybe share that other segment of the industry's experiences with someone that might think they know, but really doesn't know.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's talk a little bit about your acting. What are some of the films and TV series that people may have seen you in?
That's a funny thing as an actor. If you tell anyone in society that you're an actor, almost always the first question is, well, what have I seen you in? And I always reply, well, I don't know what you watch. Because that's such a hard question, right? But I've had the opportunity to do a few television shows and movies, obviously, throughout the years. I think some of the more watched ones might be The Florida Project, which was nominated for Oscars last year, Nashville, House of Cards, Bloodline, Dolphin Tale 2. There are, some other ones that if you watch family movies and things like that, but those are some of the most common ones that people have seen me in most recently.
And you've acted in major projects as well as hundreds of television spots. What's the difference in the audition or casting process from a film and television project versus spot work?
That's a good question. Well, a lot of things have changed in the casting process for film and television in the last 10 years. There's been a massive change in the industry in the Southeast because we've gone from almost always auditioning in person, having an audition with the casting director, and then having a call back with the director and the producers, and then possibly booking the project. We hardly ever do that anymore, and we actually now go on tape for television and film projects throughout the Southeast. So what will happen is that your agent will submit you for a big project. Let's use House of Cards as an example. House of Cards sends out a breakdown on breakdown services, and agents have the opportunities to submit to that. Your agent submits you, and casting directors tell me that they get between 800 and 1,000 submissions for the typical television episodic role, the co-star. They narrow that down, depends on the casting director, but they'll narrow it down to anywhere from 30 to 100 actors that they'll actually invite to read for the role. When they invite you to read for the role, they'll send you sides, and then it is your job as an actor to get professionally taped and send them a really polished professional audition. That's why we have taping services like my company that will tape you at the drop of a hat. What feels like an emergency to an actor is not an emergency to a taping company because we're used to this. We normally only have about 24 to 48 hours to turn around that finished product audition. And so then we will send that audition off to casting, and then we are almost always booked straight from tape for episodic television. Occasionally there are callbacks, but it's really like 1 out of 100. So we really don't even get in the room with them. They book us straight from tape, and we're suddenly shooting 2 days from now, and we drive or fly to wherever it's shooting, and that's how that process works. For film, we might have a callback because film has a little bit longer pre-production process. The directors often will want to meet you in the room. So maybe we send that tape originally, and then we get to go into the room for a callback. So that's how the process for film and television works. For commercials, it's very different. In the commercial casting world, you almost always will audition in person. So your first round of auditioning is with the commercial casting director, and then they will send that audition off to the ad agency and the director, and those people will decide who gets a call back. And so there might be anywhere from 5 to 20 people called back for each role. You will go to an in-person callback, and in that in-person callback for commercial casting, you're going to have kind of a slew of people. You've got your representatives from the ad agency that wrote the spot and are controlling the ad spending. You've got often a representative from the actual company who the spot is for, and then you've got your director, your commercial director, who is very often just a person for hire, just like an actor is. They were just hired to come in and direct that commercial. And so you've got all of those kind of decision makers in the room. They each have kind of a different amount of ability to make a decision depending on that particular spot. You audition for them in person. They might give you some adjustments, and then you are cast directly from that session. So they're really very different processes now, and we kind of have to have different skill sets in the way that we audition, because auditioning in person requires a certain energy. Sending in a polished professional tape requires a different sort of expertise and energy. So they're different processes, and both are fun, but for different reasons.
So let's talk about ClassAct Studios now. When did you open the company? And you talked a little bit about overall why you offered the services that you do, but what made you decide that this is what you were going to do as opposed to just one thing or another?
I opened ClassAct officially in 2012 is when we sort of said, okay, we're our own studio. But I had been teaching under the umbrella of another acting studio in town since 2002. So for 10 years, I taught under the umbrella of my mentor's acting studio, and I taught the advanced classes. But she didn't have space for me in her studio because she actually had a class on the same nights that I originally started teaching on Wednesday nights. And she had a class on that time. So at that time, so I had to go and rent a separate space, and it would be students that she referred to me. They'd already come through her program, and then when they were at an advanced level, she had an advanced class and I had an advanced class, and so she would refer students to me. And so I did that, and then I added a Tuesday class about 3 or 4 years in, and so I had a Tuesday night and a Wednesday night class. But with my experience on all those different sides of the industry, like we talked about, I started offering workshops too. So I would have workshops available, and I was doing a lot of kind of industry coaching, and anything from coaching actors on their auditions to teaching about commercials and workshops, and then we were doing those film and television classes on Tuesday and Wednesday nights, and then tapings started, and that became a really big thing starting around 2009. And so I was taping actors, and I had kind of all these little different things going on, and honestly, her studio just did not have the capacity for me to be able to do all the things that I wanted to do anymore. And we had this plethora of actors in town that needed more good training and more good training options, and she was an amazing mentor to me. But things change after your own time in the industry, and you learn your own things and things that you want to bring, and I wanted to make sure that I wasn't stepping on her toes with her studio, and so it just made the most sense for me finally to break off into my own world and be able to offer all the things that I really wanted to offer and not have to worry about stepping on anyone's toes. And so the time for that finally came in 2012. It was very hard for me to break off because I loved her so much, and it's hard to make a change like that. But it really worked out for the best, and she was supportive of that. And it's been a great thing. I think Orlando is a big enough and dynamic enough market that obviously it can support multiple different ideas and different acting studios and things like that. And I think it was time, and we obviously had a need in the market because things have gone really well for us. And I think that's just simply because it was the right timing, and I hopefully had the right information to bring to the market.
Well, and it sounds like you had the advantage of, for lack of a better term, almost a trial run where you were able to test out different things in your previous role to say, okay, this works well, I want to continue this. This might not work in this capacity, so let's tweak that. So when you started your own studio, there really wasn't a whole lot of trial and error per se, because you had been doing that for a couple of years to figure out what was working.
100%. I was so fortunate. Because I had the advantage of working at a studio that, like you said, gave me the opportunity to try those things out, that was huge. And I also had the advantage of having been teaching for 10 years, and so my reputation as a teacher had been able to be out there in the community. So, yes, I was branding myself separate from her, but people already knew me as an acting coach, and so it was a very effortless transition. And so one of the main things that was important to me was I wanted to make sure I was not going into competition with her studio, because I didn't want to think of her as competition. I wanted to think of her as a sister studio. I never wanted to take anything from her, And so that was an important thing, in making sure that I was offering some different options and that I had gone over that stuff with her and everything too, so that she didn't feel that I was taking from her. And so that transition took time. It was something that we kind of talked about for a couple of years and everything, but when we did it, it worked out as well as it possibly could have, I think, all things considered. And I was able to offer all these things to the industry that we didn't have in the market at that time, and I think still don't, that ClassAct was able to bring simply because of businesses that I'd had. As an artistic director, I just wanted to make sure that I had the opportunity to share those unique experiences that I'd had.
At any given time of the year, how many actors are you working with, and what are the variety of levels?
We have 6 classes that are ongoing. There are 16 students in each, so that's 96 that are currently enrolled at any time. Our classes start with foundations. So whether an actor has 20 years of experience or they're brand new to the industry, we start them in the class that we call Foundations. And the reason for that is because we have to teach them our method, our methodology, how we work, how we break down a scene, the different terms that we use, because every studio has a different way of approaching things. And so no one comes into my studio and starts an advanced class. That's just not how it works, because everyone has to get on the same page. And so we start in Foundations. Our Foundations classes enroll 3 times a year, so we have enrollment, and the classes will start in either January, May, or September. And there are 2 options to study during that semester. So we have a Monday day class for people that like to take day classes, or they could choose to take a Thursday night class. And that class runs for 12 weeks. And then from Foundations, after that, it's an invite-only sort of scenario, because we have 32 students in Foundations classes that are angling for 16 spots in our next level, which is intensive. So then we invite the 16 that we feel like are best suited to move forward at that time, and those go into intensive. And then from there, we have 3 advanced classes that are also invitation only. So basically, they're sort of learning and auditioning throughout the process, and then are invited into different levels of advanced classes and stuff. So so there are 6 classes constantly going on, but then we also have things like a teen class that we offer throughout the year at different times, and then we have workshops that are throughout the year. We normally have at least 1 or 2 workshops a month that are opportunities for actors to study, and they don't have to be with our studio. They could come from anywhere. They're open to the public. All of our workshops are open to the public.
And I've spent some time in your classes, thankfully not participating, but just observing. And what I'm always thinking about is that these actors that are sitting in these classes are helping each other get better, but at the same time, they might be competing tooth and nail against each other for a specific role. What's that like?
First of all, I've tried really hard to get you to participate, but you're just so reluctant.
Yes.
It's funny that as a non-actor kind of thinks like that, and that makes sense to me. And actually, there are some actors that think like that. We spend so much time at ClassAct actually trying to change the way that we think about things like that. It is my belief that other actors are never your competition. They're actually your biggest source of support because nobody gets it like another actor will. You know, if I call my mom and I say, "Oh my God, Mom, I booked a role on House of Cards," she is so excited for me, so excited. And then she says, "Well, how many lines do you have?" And if you say, "Well, I've got 2 lines," and she says, "Only 2? Well, when are they going to let you speak some more?" Because that's what a non-actor sees. But if I turn to my friend in acting class and say, "Oh my God, I just booked 2 lines on House of Cards," she is beyond excited because she knows how much I had to go through to get those 2 lines. She knows that it's like winning the lottery and that it required so many things to fall into place. So to me, and the culture that we really, really try to cultivate at ClassAct is that you are your only competition. My best friends in the industry are other Caucasian women in my age range often, and we go out for the same roles all the time. But if my friend Kristen books this role, it was never my role. It was Kristen's. You know, she's a petite, adorable redhead. And clearly they weren't looking for me. They were looking for her. This was her role. And so I have a big belief that there are enough roles for all of us in the industry, and that if I can't have the role, I sure as heck want another actor that I know busts their butt and studies hard and is always working and cares about me and cares about other actors. I want them to have that role. And so I wanted to be one of my people. That's how we think of it. So at the studio, we consider ourselves a tribe, and we talk about that all the time. We're there to lift each other up and to support each other and to commiserate. And when those natural human feelings of jealousy or envy enter in, we go, gosh, I wish I had my opportunity. And then we say, and I'll have one. It's coming soon. And then we move on so that we can celebrate for the other person. So it's a big kind of mind shift to make sure that you realize you need these other people. You need this tribe around you in order to support you, because that's how you stay in the industry, is loving the people that you're working with and recognizing that our job is to audition and booking it is just gravy. So they really do a great job of that, and we are able to support each other and cheer each other on and just really, really revel in each other's successes. And I think it makes us all feel more successful, because then you don't just have your successes to cheer for, you have all these people around you that you can cheer for as well.
That makes a lot of sense, and actually is a great philosophy. And I've talked with others on the talent side of the business about the amount of rejection that an actor can go through and how difficult it is mentally and emotionally. I'm guessing that's a big part of your process. Talk a little bit about that.
That's definitely the biggest struggle that I would say most actors face. And it's a hard thing to understand that. Unlike other industries, you know, you can do everything right. You can really, really work to train, and you can show up at the auditions, and you can have the right toolkit and have the right headshots and just do everything right and still not get the job. And that's a really hard thing to wrap your mind around. And so we just, again, that's why that community support is so important. Having that tribe is so important because they get it. It is a really, really important thing to learn to love auditioning if you want to be a professional actor, because really auditioning is that 3-minute opportunity that we have to have the role. So every audition, if every audition is like, yes, I get to act today, then you find the joy in the process and you learn to depend on the product, which would be booking the role, less. I mean, no matter how great you are, ultimately only one person can book the role. Only one. So, and the myriad reasons that people book a role often have very little to do with talent and everything to do with everything else, you know, your look, your type, your ethnicity, your height, your age, your weight, your, you know, whether or not you look like you could match the son that they have booked for this project. All kinds of different things that have nothing to do with talent and everything to do with kind of luck and marketing and things like that. So I really try to convey to my actors that all we can do is be as prepared as we possibly can for every opportunity that presents itself so that we're ready when we do have our shot. But you got to love the process, because if you are a product-oriented person, then being a professional actor is going to just be a constant source of pain and angst for you. If your belief is that you only win if you're booking the role, then you're definitely going to have a really, really hard road in this industry.
Lauren, whether it's a project we've already talked about or a different one, what's your favorite project that you've been a part of and why?
That's a hard question. You know, I've had so many great experiences in this industry because I just love it so much. I love the collaboration aspect of working with a team of people to get a shot right. I love the camaraderie that comes with the industry and that feeling of just being on a set. There's nothing like it. Or the feeling of waiting in an audition waiting room and you're there with a bunch of people that you see consistently throughout the month doing the same thing. I love the feeling of acting class and that energy and passion and joy that we all have in being there. I guess one of my most recent experiences that comes to mind that was really great was shooting the Florida project with Willem Dafoe. That was a project that kind of came out of nowhere for me. It didn't have the traditional casting process. I wasn't really expecting much because it was a modified low-budget SAG film, so it wasn't a huge budget. I think it was $5 million, which obviously is a lot of money. I would love to have that in my bank account, but it's not big on the Hollywood side of things. And I didn't even know Willem Dafoe was attached to the project until I got my call sheet. So it was a surprise to me, and then I got to work with him for a week, and he was such a joy and such a master. It was so amazing to work with people that you admire and, you know, you've grown up watching and watch him work and have really great laughs with him and tease him and just see the human side of him, and work with Sean Baker, who was the director and who was such an interesting, cool, kind artist. And this little girl, Brooklyn, who starred in the Florida project, who had been my commercial daughter in multiple commercials prior to that shoot. So Sean Baker was shocked when I walked on set the first day, and I actually play a DCF investigator in the Florida project who comes to take Brooklyn away from her kind of train wreck of a mom. And when I came on the set the first day, Brooklyn came running across and said, "Mom," to me, because we just shot a commercial together a few weeks before, and jumped in my arms. And Sean was like, mind blown. "Wait, you guys know each other?" I said, yeah, we've acted in a few commercials together. He said, "That's crazy," because he doesn't realize that the Southeastern market is actually pretty small. You know, pretty much everybody, it feels like, that's actually working. So that was, the whole process was just a really great surprise, and I think that's part of why I hold on to it. And then to, have Willem Dafoe nominated for an Oscar for that role, wow, I'm actually working in this industry that I love so much. And so it wasn't so much about the finished product of it, because, and this is this is the thing that I want aspiring actors to know. I had such an amazing time on that project. But the editing of that project left me as little more than a voiceover. I mean, you see me in the film, and I'm in multiple scenes, but actually multiple scenes that I got to shoot with Willem were cut. And when I showed up at the premiere, the director actually pulled me aside. He was really lovely, Sean, and he said, "Hey, I wanted to let you know that I really, really loved your work. I had to cut scenes with Willem. It had nothing to do with you. It was everything to do with the storyline." And he was so gracious to tell me that, but I totally got it because when I watched the project, it made sense. They ended up cutting all of the scenes that really just focused on the adults, and they only focused on the perspective of the kids to tell the kids' story, which made perfect sense. But what someone that only looks at product might see is like, wow, well, I mean, yeah, you're in it, but your head's cut off in some of these, or they're shooting, you've got this long monologue, but it's not on your face, it's on the mom's face, and so I don't see you a lot. That is absolutely true. But you can't take that experience away from me, So from a process standpoint, it was such a valuable, enjoyable, wonderful process, and the product was secondary to that to me.
Thanks for sharing the stories and the insight about your part of the business, Lauren. That'll do it for this episode of the Film Florida podcast. Thanks to Lauren O'Quinn for joining us, and thank you for listening. To learn more about ClassAct Studios, visit ClassActStudiosOrlando.com. That's ClassActStudiosOrlando.com. For more information about Film Florida, go to filmflorida.org or visit our social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And of course, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast.